Good morning, and greetings from Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States, on this fine fall day. My name is Larry Prusak, and I've been a researcher and consultant on issues of knowledge, information, and data for the last 25 years or so. I'm very sorry I can't be with you for your conference this October. Actually, it's next week. I would have liked to, but for technical reasons, it became not possible for me to do so. I enjoy coming to Moscow, and hopefully I'll be back in next April. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the new world of knowledge that we're entering, the knowledge age. Many people used to talk about the information age, but that day has come and gone, and we now live in a more knowledge-based society and economy. In this brief talk, I'd like to talk about three factors that really influence why we're in the knowledge age and what it means for companies and countries. The first one to talk about is the actual economic value of knowledge. Now, human beings have been developing and working with knowledge since we've been human beings. We wouldn't have had any progress whatsoever if we hadn't. But in the last 20 or 25 years, a number of new factors developed that allow knowledge to be infinitely more valuable and more pervasive in our lives than ever before. Some of these factors were technological development, knowledge technologies, communication technologies. You don't need me to talk about those things. You know them very well. But combining those things with a better understanding of the value of knowledge and the fact of political and social development around the world lead knowledge to be a far more valuable force of production than the traditional forces of production. If you look at most economic textbooks around the world, they'll talk about three forces of production: land, labor, and capital. Land being all natural resources, labor being generally physical labor or various forms of physical strength and mechanical strength, and capital, usually meaning financial capital. And yet, knowledge is more valuable than any of them. I could look at all sorts of firms in the United States, in Europe, around the world, that are really based on knowledge. They're not necessarily based on those other things. The world has plenty of money available, and it has plenty of resources. And it's certainly physical and mechanical labor and strength are available. But it's knowledge that makes the difference. In the late 1980s, I went to hear a talk by a number of financial and consultant-type people who were beginning to talk about the internet and what to do with it in terms of business and a source of wealth. Jeff Bezos got up and gave a talk. He was a financial analyst at the time, and he talked about his vision for using the internet to completely disrupt retailing, both in the United States and globally. He was interesting. He wasn't a great speaker, but he had an interesting idea. That idea became Amazon, and Amazon is now worth $1 trillion in the United States, based on an idea which came out of the knowledge that Bezos had. If you look at the history of Google, another firm that's almost worth $1 trillion, it was based on the idea of a search algorithm developed by two Stanford University researchers. It wasn't dependent on money, on labor of any sort except mental labor, and natural resources. This is true for firm after firm after firm. I mean, small countries, large countries, the advantages of strength, of largeness and resources are fading. A good example of this is South Korea, which has nothing in it except Koreans and knowledge and hard work. They recently passed England in terms of national wealth. England had all the traditions, had all the strength, was the first country to really industrialize. But Korea passed it based largely on various forms of knowledge, teaching, and the government's encouragement of education. So we have a whole different world now. A world where the most valuable resource is knowledge and not those other things. The second major force that we should talk about is the democratization of knowledge capabilities throughout the world. This is also a new phenomenon. It's never been seen in the world before, that almost all countries throughout the world have knowledge institutions. And what I mean by that, universities, government centers, government programs, and NGO programs that encourage the development and dissemination of knowledge. Again, these things would never happened before. It was all countries were for themselves, and only a few countries really had these capabilities right up to the Second World War. Imperialism played a role here, that England and the United States, Germany, kept some countries down, especially in Asia and Africa. That's gone. World War II destroyed all of that. And because of that, all countries began to flourish in terms of knowledge. What this means is that more people in more countries can do more things with knowledge than ever before in the history of the world. They have the capabilities and they have the institutions. This is a new thing. It's made our world hyper-competitive. Anytime you bring out a product, whatever it is, if it's based on knowledge, others will go after it. They'll try to imitate it. They'll try to get ahead of it. And because knowledge flows, knowledge is somewhat available to people, it can happen. It does happen. The knowledge dynamics throughout the world are very complex and very apparent. This is all new to the world. It's a new world of knowledge. And it really matters. It brings us to the issue of knowledge markets, both within organizations and throughout the world. So if knowledge is so valuable, are firms and governments attempting to measure it, to work better with it? Some yes and some no, but the answer is still more no than yes. Firms still measure quarterly returns, how many hours people work, and productivity in a very retrogressive way. We don't quite know how to manage and measure knowledge productivity. It's something I'm working on, quite a few other people are working on. But knowledge is a different substance than land, labor, and capital, and governments and firms still measure land, labor, and capital rather than knowledge. So there's a real gap between what's going on in terms of knowledge development and what's going on in the way governments and firms structure their work and structure the measures they use to determine their work. We still have GDP, GMP, hours worked per day. Those are somewhat irrelevant in a knowledge-based society. Look at countries that are far more interested in knowledge than they are in the measurement of it, or the measurement of the traditional forms. Look at countries, look at companies that do that. You'll find they're structured very differently than traditional forms of work. This leaves great opening and opportunities for all of us. How to organize an organization so that it exploits and takes advantage of the knowledge not only of its own workers, but the knowledge available in the world. How to look outside yourself, look outside your country, your office, your organization, and search for knowledge that's useful to you. The world is really open in this regard. Maybe people aren't happy about that, but it is. So you have a great world ahead of you, the new world of knowledge. I'd encourage all of you to think about this and try to develop your own organizations to take advantage of this new form of wealth. I hope to meet some of you maybe later next year, and thank you for listening to this. Good day.